Hi there and welcome to Sector Report. In this edition we look at undoubtedly one of the biggest emergencies ever to hit horticulture in this country. I'm talking of course about the appearance of the deadly PSA bacterium on kiwifruit orchards in the Bay of Plenty. Will we contain it and conquer it, or could it run unchecked, destroying our $1.5 billion in kiwifruit exports? I talked to the man who runs Zespri. He makes it clear how very serious this biosecurity threat is. I go out in the field in the Bay of Plenty and talk to growers and to Doug Voss, an industry heavyweight who witnessed the Italian PSA disaster firsthand. But first, Zespri CEO Lane Jager. Well, Lane, welcome back to the Sector Report program here on Country 99 TV. Now, how is this crisis affecting people in the industry at a human level? It must be a very stressful time, not just for growers, but for the tens of thousands of people dependent on the kiwifruit industry to make a living.
Well, I think shock is a good word to start with. I think the recognition that, hey, PSA is here, followed by a roller coaster ride, really as the perception of the virulence of PSA waxes and wanes. And of course, a sense of overwhelming urgency. And so that is a big part of the industry dialogue at the moment.
Of course, there's been a huge rumour mill at work, and I guess that doesn't help establish an attitude of, shall we say, calm determination.
Look, as I say, I think the overwhelming sense is one of urgency. Of course, demand for information. People want to know what's happening. You know, as we sit here today, it's important just to remember that we've only got 13 affected orchards, and those orchards are all sitting within a 25-kilometre radius, really just south of Te Puke. That's less than 1% of the industry affected, and it's all gold orchards so far. So our opportunity as an industry is to act aggressively to contain this disease and stop its spread.
One grower I've heard is calling for more accurate information instead of rumours. Do you think you've had enough information out there?
Well, I think the information flow has been extremely good. On the Zespri canopy, on the website, there's reporting updated twice, 3 times a day, showing exactly how many tests have been done, how many tests are negative, how many tests are positive, where those positives are. And so the factual information being provided is actually very good. Of course, the real question as we sit here today is what is the action plan going forward? And that's our focus. That's what we need to try and determine in the next 2 or 3 days.
Of course, by the time this interview goes to air, you will have made those decisions. But what options are you looking at?
Very simply, what we've got is we've got PSA here in New Zealand. We don't know how long it's been here, but so far as we can tell, it's only a recent incursion. The other piece of information, which I think, as I've said already, so far this is only on 13 orchards, all within a 25-kilometre radius. The question is, can we eradicate it? An important piece of information is that this PSA on the affected orchards, this bacteria, is showing signs of secondary and tertiary symptoms. What I mean by that is we're not only seeing spotted leaves, but we are beginning to see some dieback on the affected plants, and in some cases even weeping coming from the vines, which are signs of progression of the disease. We've met on Sunday of this week, and really what we've agreed together, I have to say, with some very good support from MAF, is that aggressive containment is our best first step, and that is to say finding out how broadly this is spread across the country, containing it on those orchards where we can find it, and then really taking quite strong action to cut out the affected plant material and make it safe. In the first case, by bagging it so that the bacteria can't spread further through the industry. Now, what we're doing right now, and why there appears to be just a little bit of a hiatus, is of course there's an enormous amount of detail. We need to put in place the management protocols. There's a grower support package to put in place because the affected growers, this is terrible for them financially. And so we need to get those two things in place. And of course, we need to work out how to fund that. And so, we'll be talking to the government about that later this week, following on from industry agreement about those packages, which we're seeking to get tonight. So there's an enormous amount of work going on behind the scenes. And our goal is to have clarity on all of those things, if we can, and it's aggressive, but if we can have clarity on those things by the end of this week, then we will be in a very good place indeed to be able to manage this going forward.
How likely is it that we've actually had this infection lurking away undetected for a number of years?
Well, we've looked back at some historical samples to see if we could find evidence of it. We can't. That doesn't mean it hasn't been here for a number of years. What we know is that this thing, can sit latent on plant material and then flare up depending on how stressed vines are, seasonal conditions. So we just don't know that. We can't find any evidence that this is not a recent incursion. And so we are acting on the basis that this is potentially serious, that the potential that it's been here for a long time is not reason not to act.
Well, if it is a recent arrival, how do you think it got here?
We just don't know. I wouldn't like to speculate. Of course, there's all sorts of rumour in the industry. There's a broad dialogue about it. To be honest, our focus is on, now that it is here, what do we do going forward? No doubt there'll be opportunities to do tracebacks, for MAF to do that investigative work. And so, all of those things, they're questions to be contended with in the future. Right now, we've got to stop its spread.
How about the controls we have in place on imports, such as pollen and cuttings from vines, which could be carrying the infection?
New Zealand is one of the most protected places in the world. Certainly the New Zealand kiwifruit industry had not been voicing concern about biosecurity previously. We don't know how this got here. Now that it is here, we need to contend with it going forward. But that's all I've really got to say.
Is it realistic to expect to eradicate this bacterium?
Well, I hope so. So far it's only on 13 orchards. I think MAF is saying, hey, that's pretty difficult technically, but we all agree that while this thing seems to be contained on 13 orchards or 20 orchards or whatever that number is, let's get in. Let's take out the affected plant material. Let's make it safe. And over the next six months, we'll have a much better picture of where we are. And it's in that context that we'll be able to decide whether to pursue eradication or what management regime is in fact appropriate going forward. The important thing is we act very, very quickly to reduce our exposure to this bacteria now, while we've got an opportunity early in the piece. We'll know in the next 6 months whether eradication is on the table or not.
By the way, what happens to the plant material that's been already gathered and will be gathered for some time to come and put into bags? What's actually going to happen to those bags?
Look, we don't know that question right now. What we're doing is we're bagging it. We think we can probably burn it under certain conditions, or we may bury it. MAF are working on that technical question. But the important thing is that while it's bagged, this bacteria isn't escaping to infect other orchards. And so what we've got is we've got a stopgap approach, and we'll develop it further.
What's the theory about why it hit at this particular time of the season?
Well, generally speaking, PSA emerges at some times of the year. This is the time of the year where it typically emerges. One of the key questions is how much will it spread over the summer? And because we have relatively mild summers, there's reason to think that it might spread quite a lot over the summer, which is one of the reasons why it's so urgent that we respond rapidly to this.
What's the risk to our markets if there is a serious infestation? Would importers be worried that our fruit could actually carry the PSA bacterium?
No, look, this is not a safe food issue, nor is fruit a vector for this, which is a technical way of saying this disease is not known to be transported on the fruit itself. And so in that case, this shouldn't be a market access issue, except for, budwood plant material itself. So we don't think it's a market access issue, and so far none of our markets have responded in that way. I also need to point out that obviously this is in Japan, Korea, Italy already. And so, we don't think this is a market access issue. We think it's an economic issue because it kills kiwifruit vines.
Well, finally, Lane, it's been called the foot and mouth disease of the kiwifruit industry. Your worst nightmare?
look potentially very, very serious indeed. What's needed now is urgent action, collective action, and actually, I'm very confident. This is an industry that is strongly united. We have enormous technical resources, enormous determination, and I remain an optimist while recognising how serious this is.
Well, thanks very much for finding the time to join us today in what is obviously a very busy time for Zespri.
Thank you.
Lane Jager there. I'll be back in a moment with a field report from the Bay of Plenty where growers are under incredible stress as they watch the disease take its deadly course. As the number of infected orchards grows inexorably and PSA is found outside the Te Puke area, a bacterial invasion of our vital kiwifruit vines has put the industry on red alert. This crisis is probably the biggest ever to hit horticulture in this country. Ross Hart is a bit of a rebel in the grower establishment, but he talks around a lot. There's no doubt growers are stressed.
It's really serious. As in the latest Kiwifruit journal, the KGI president has said, it's the foot and mouth of the industry.
So do you think that it's going to put a lot of stress on people at a personal level?
Absolutely, it is already. It is already. The phone calls that I'm fielding, there's an element of people wanting to know what's exactly happening. And I do believe that the leadership has let us down to a certain extent in so far as giving us more guidance and certainly keeping the growers more aware of what's actually happening out there. Okay, we're getting up-to-date information now to a point, but there's still a lot of, we're on the same. What do you do, you know? And as time goes on, it looks as though there's not a lot we can do.
But ask Kiwifruit Growers President Peter Ombler how his members are handling it.
Actually, I think remarkably well, and I don't doubt that I'm not seeing all the stress that's underneath, but people are being pretty brave about this and pretty pragmatic, I would say. Even the people whose properties have the infection or who have been quarantined, I would have said have been remarkably pragmatic about the situation, but we all understand the seriousness of it, and this is serious. I think that part of the financial implication for those growers will be how, what sort of package is put to them in terms of how they respond to this problem. But of course, there's a larger industry good thing here, so we're all mindful of how we'll deal with it.
One of the first to find his orchard was infected was Te Puke grower Russell West.
The cash flow that we're operating on at the moment is produced by last year's crop, so financially we're okay. But next year, depending on the severity of the disease spread, there's some nightmare sort of scenarios that are sitting out there.